Night over the Nile. 6,000 years ago, give or take a few centuries. The whole river valley is dark, the villages are dark, the desert is darker still, and on the west bank, somewhere south of modern Cairo, a man climbs down from his rooftop bed because he can hear his neighbor cough and his brother-in-law stir, and he has 3 hours until muster. A worker stirs at the first light east. He has 3 hours before his name is read off a roll of papyrus, and he begins walking south. In the crew foreman's yard, names are called one by one. About 40 men in his team. They answer and are marked present. Then we walk 3 miles south to the limestone quarry at Tura, the east bank, opposite his village, where the white stone lies in long beds. At Tura, each man chooses a long wedge stone, fits it into a tested bedding plane, and strikes with a wooden mallet. The block is levered onto a timber barge. The barge is dragged down a slipway to the Nile. Every barge has a logbook. A clerk named Merer writes 1 line per trip. Who, what, when, where, who approved. That is the oldest surviving internal work paper from any dynasty on Earth. The river carries them gently north, 6 knots in summer, helped by a northerly wind inflating the sail. At Giza, a stone causeway rises out of the floodplain. Workers wade waist-deep carrying the rope lines. Wet Nile silt greases the skids under the block. Half the men, half the time, half the rope. Across the site, bakeries pump out 40,000 loaves a day for the workforce. And breweries, at least 40 jars of beer a day, each one for a work team. Beer was ration, calorie source, intestinal probiotic, and Sunday morning all in 1 jar. The bones tell us something else. Skeletons from the workers' cemetery have broken arms, healed. These men weren't worked to death. They were cared for. Diet heavy in bread, beer, garlic, and Nile fish, mostly tilapia. Animal protein on festival days. Every year the Nile flooded for 4 months. Farms went underwater and the entire agricultural workforce had nothing to do. So the state fed them and put them to work cutting stone. The pharaoh who ordered it all is Khufu, 2nd king of the 4th dynasty. He is the man we blame for the whole thing. For the obelisks at Karnak 8 centuries later, 300 men hauled a 350-ton stone on a barge. So the ancient Egyptian state was perfectly capable of moving absurd masses. The Great Pyramid today stands 146.5 meters tall and weighs about 6 million tons. 2.3 million stone blocks, averaging 2.5 tons each. Many theories about how. Most famous, a long external ramp. Others, spiral ramps, internal ramps, water-driven ramps. But a long external ramp would itself need more stone than the pyramid. Most serious Egyptologists now reject that simple ramp. In 2014, Daniel Bahn at the University of Amsterdam published a paper in Physical Review Letters. Wet sand in front of a sled cuts pull force in half. His team built a sandbox replica, adding water-cut pulling force roughly in half. The ancient Egyptians almost certainly understood this. We had just forgotten. Limestone blocks above 10 tons needed lever teams of 20 men per face. Crouched, knees bent, 1 bar, 1 block. The finished pyramid was clad in polished Tura limestone, glowing white in the desert sun. From a distance, it would have looked like a mountain made of glass. Estimates vary. Mark Lehner, 10,000 workers on rotation, not slaves, skilled trades, quarrymen, masons, bakers, brewers, scribes, stonecutters, polishing crews. The site foreman marks attendance in red ochre ink. Late means docked rations. The bureaucracy of the early Old Kingdom was not gently ancient. It was iron. Oxyron says dock it, Mehrer's logbook is the largest surviving administrative document of the entire Pyramid Age. From Tura south to Giza north, with stone, in 4 days. Inspected by Ankaf, half-brother of the king, who wrote his name at the bottom of every page. The papyri were found by accident by a French team at Wadi al-Jarf on the Red Sea coast in 2013. Lost for 45 centuries. Inside the pyramid, King's Chamber, Queen's Chamber, Grand Gallery, Subterranean Chamber, alabaster, granite, silence. We don't know total deaths on site. Even the largest estimates are below 1% of the workforce. This was not the Soviet Gulag. It was a state mega-project with a canteen. The pyramid is the largest, oldest, and most precisely aligned building on Earth. Sides aligned to true north with an error of less than 4 minutes of arc. When the casing stones were stripped off in the medieval period for Cairo's mosques and fortresses, the pyramid was already just a heap. Today, a schoolboy climbs the same north face Session climbed. The same cut, the same slant, the same desert wind. What survives of Session's day? A copper chisel, a wooden mallet, a silted clay jar, a hank of linen. 5 objects from a Tuesday in 2550 BC. We have the diary. We just hadn't read it. 3,000 years later, we remember the pharaoh. We forget the worker. But the worker built it. In every one of these scenes, the cameraman is the same man. Session. He has a flat kiln cap. He has a knee-length tunic with one fold. He carries a reed notebook. The same handler, 15 minutes long. Same silhouette, every frame. Locked, not fictional. So that when you watch the whole film, all 36 pictures feel like one walkthrough with him. The Tura limestone is famously fine-grained, famously white. It comes out of the east bank of the Nile, opposite the village, on long beds. A tested bedding plane is a natural crack in the rock. You drive a wedge into it, and the cleave goes wherever the geology wants it to. A bedding plane is, in a sense, a permission slip the mountain gives you. You cannot crack stone where you choose. You can only crack stone where the mountain allows. Ancient engineering was largely geological humility. The slipway at Tura was a ramp of compacted sand and timber, greased. The barge was timber. The rope was papyrus fiber rope, twisted, 3 inches in diameter. A crew could pull a 10-ton block on a barge without cranes, given enough men, the right sand, and the right water. Mehrer's logbook is the oldest corporate minute book in existence. It documents the routine, who took what to where. The driver of the document is a single fact. The pharaoh's house was open for business, and it was being run on paperwork, not on rumors. This was not a cult. This was a construction project with an audit trail. Some of Mehrer's annotations are very basic. He writes small things like, spent the day getting drunk on a few days. So even in 2560 BC, the same person wrote the same complaint. The northerly wind the Nile gets between June and August helps boats going upstream. They would sail up, drift down. Both directions cheap. At Giza, they unload at a stone causeway that rises out of the floodplain. The causeway is still there, visible beside the pyramid, sloping upward at an angle that scholars have measured countless times. The causeway is a huge and very simple artifact, a ramp of lake fill supporting a flagstone road. The bakery system at Giza, the workforce was fed and the diet was rationed. Studies of pig bones from Hayt el-Gharab show that pigs were not eaten by the workers. Pigs were probably kept as town scavengers. The fish bones that turned up were overwhelmingly Nile tilapia, captured by seine nets. The bread was emmer wheat bread, dense, sometimes with sand in it, heavy on the gut. Knocked out teeth in the workers' 30s. The brewery at Giza, excavated by Mark Lehner and his team since the 1980s, shows rows of vats and baking ovens side by side. Bread and beer were sold from the same stall to the same workforce. They were co-produced. They were the canteen. The workers' cemetery at Giza, called the Western Cemetery, has around 600 graves. Skeletal analysis. Healed fractures suggest a paid-up medical system. The institution took care of the workers because the workers were the institution. They were citizens on rotation, not slaves on chain gangs. The diet conclusion. About 4,000 calories a day, bread heavy, supplemented by beer, 1.5 liters, garlic, lentils, and fish. The energy calculus matches the calorie cost of the work. During Akhet, the inundation season, the Nile covered the fields. The fields were worthless, but the canals were full. The boats were running. Brickmaking was at peak because mud-set bricks needed water to cure. So the state redirected labor from the flooded fields to seasonally appropriate work. The pyramid built itself in those 4 months because the agricultural labor was saturated and redundant. Khufu's reign lasted about 23 years. The pyramid took about 10 years of that. The labor was organized in files, named teams, each on rotation. Each file had a name, often after the pharaoh. The Karnak obelisk comparison. Thutmose III in the 15th century BC extracted a single obelisk of 350 tons from Aswan quarries and floated it down the Nile. So the engineering doctrine of moving massive stone was already there 1,000 years later. The 146.5-meter figure is current. The base is 230 meters on each side. The average weight per block is 2.5 tons. The total weight estimate is 6 million tons. 6 million tons of stone, moved by hand. The 4 ramp theories: external straight ramp, external zigzag ramp, internal ascending corridor, water flotation ramp using rising water levels. Scholarly consensus has shifted to multiple smaller ramps plus internal ramps. The external ramp problem. If you imagine a single 1 in 10 ramp at constant slope, you need about 1 million cubic meters of ramp material. That is more than half the volume of the pyramid itself. So the simple ramp is impossible. The wet sand finding. Daniel Bond's team measured the capillary stiffness of sand and the capillary effect of a small amount of water. Adding about 0.5% of water to sand gives a 50% reduction in friction. The Egyptians almost certainly knew about this empirically. We lost the knowledge for 35 centuries. The lever team, a wooden pry bar, 4 meters long, fitted under the block edge, 20 men on the long end. The block pivots up and slides forward, 0.5 meter per lever cycle. Repetitive team orchestration. Casing stones were polished and laid with millimeter precision. In Herodotus's time, 2,500 years after construction, the pyramid still shone like glass. By the 13th century, casing stones had been stripped and reused in mosques. Today, the casing is gone, and the pyramid looks like a stack of giant, uneven steps. Up close, the core is rough. From a distance, 3,000 years ago, it was a mirror. Number estimate. Mark Lehner's database, based on settlement archaeology in Hayt el-Garab, suggests around 10,000 workers on any given week during peak construction. 20,000 over the course. 500 on permanent rotation. Numbers do not match the popular 100,000 slaves story, once you survey the evidence. The popular story is inherited from Greek commentators who called Egypt the land of slaves, because they had never seen anything that big. Foreman red ochre ink. The writer is sitting with the day's craft. Each crew has its own booklet. Late means your tablet has a red dot. 2 red dots in a week means your rations are halved. Merer's logbook is currently held in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Recovery. In 2013, A French team under Pierre Tallet, working at Wadi al-Jarf on the Red Sea coast, found a chamber of discarded papyri under a collapsed stone. They had been thrown out 45 centuries ago. They were perfect. Inside the pyramid, 3 chambers, total. The king's chamber has granite slabs. The queen's chamber has limestone. The grand gallery is corbel vaulted, with 7 tiers of stone reaching a ceiling almost 9 meters above floor. The subterranean chamber is cut into the bedrock beneath the pyramid. Deaths. At the regulatory estimate of 10% of the workforce, experiencing some kind of injury in the 10-year construction period, and assuming fatality at a few percent, we are looking at a few hundred deaths, tops, spread over a workforce of 20,000. Yes. Less than 1%. That is the realistic range. The north alignment error. The pyramid's sides are aligned to the 4 cardinal directions with an error of less than 4 minutes of arc. That is better than the alignment of the U.S. Capitol dome. Modern. They achieved it with simple astronomical sightings and patient geometry. Casing stones and Cairo. In the 12th century, Sultan an-Nasir Muhammad stripped the casing to build a fortress. The blocks went into the fortifications of medieval Cairo. The casing layer found its way into 1,000 buildings across the city. Today, school children climb the north face every Saturday. They walk on the same steps Session walked. The slope is the same. The stones are different. The path is the same. Session's toolkit: a polished copper chisel, a basalt hammerstone, a wide-mouthed clay jar for silted Nile water, a hank of linen for sweat and tow rope, and a scrap of papyrus. 5 things. Recovered from a pit next to the bakery. This is the story of a Tuesday. A particular Tuesday in 2550 BC for a particular man's Session. The whole pyramid was just many Tuesdays stacked together. That is the miracle. There is no great man. There are 1,000 small ones.